The Beatles' Happiness is a Warm Gun is not only considered one of the best standout vocal performances of John Lennon's career, but also heralded as Paul McCartney's favorite song on the White Album, created and recorded amidst the darkest epoch of the Beatles as they near disbanding. Happiness is a Warm Gun is a collection of 4 distinctly unique sequences that brought back the Fab Four into actually collaborating. Their camaraderie was waning, tensions were mounted, and the end was near. But during the White Album, there existed a handful of moments in which the band was back together, with every single member commenting how much they thoroughly enjoyed this song and its creation in the studio. So, if you ever wondered why the hobnail boots, why the lizard on the window pane, and who was the girl that didn't miss much, all those answers will be revealed and more right here, right now. Oh yeah. In our previous video, Why Did the Beatles Break Up?, we go on a thorough explanation of the escalation of disenchantment within the band and about the band. Nearing the end of our story, the infamous White Album recording sessions leaves no doubt that the Beatles were just about over, facing a battery of issues including financial woes, composition separation, coup-like business tactics, and general resentment within the band, and nearly every engineer and producer surrounding them reading the writing on the wall. Happiness proved to be one of the last collaborative efforts by the Beatles, and it shows. Paul says, "The White Album was the tension album. We were in the midst of the psychedelic thing, or just coming out of it. In any case, it was weird. Never before had we recorded with people visiting for hours on end, business meetings and all that. There was a lot of friction. It was the weirdest experience because we were about to break up. That was tense in itself." Taking shape in the spring of 1968 in Rishikesh, India, while the Beatles were studying transcendental meditation with the Maharishi, the vast majority of Happiness was finished when John returned back to England. However, one integral part of the song was inspired by specific fingerpicking techniques John learned from Donovan. Donovan's guitar playing had not only inspired Happiness, but Dear Prudence and Julia for John. Donovan says, "At the Maharishi's ashram, a very touching experience happened. John asked me to teach him some new chord structures and how to do fingerstyle guitar. You know, I knew in 1965 when we met that he and I were similar. John and Paul McCartney are Liverpool Irish, and I'm Glasgow Irish, and that means we were both in the ancient Gaelic tradition of bards and shamans and troubadours, poets of the very highest order. Those with the goal of delivering peace and wisdom. The point is that the Beatles and I were drawn together, and the time I spent in India teaching him as a student, away from the fame and fortune, was wonderful. He was a good learner. He learned in 2 days what I'd learned in 3, these flamenco, blues, and jazz chord forms that I taught him, and the fingerstyle technique developed into some of the most extraordinary songs on the White Album." During the Esher demos in May of 1968, John begins to jot down ideas for the infant song. He demos the second of the parts, mostly containing the lyrics "I Need a Fix" and Mother Superior parts of the song, and John directly relates Mother Superior to his budding relationship with Yoko Ono. And even in those Esher demos, you can hear John singing the lyrics "Yoko Ono, Ono, Yoko Ono, oh yes," but he ultimately decided to leave it out. John says, "Mother Superior was Yoko. She was rabbiting on in the car one day, and I said, 'Mother Superior jumped the gun again,' because she's always one jump ahead." So that was Yoko, really. It was camp. Everyone has a vice, and at this time, John's was sadly heroin. John constantly admitted to when songs were either definitely about drugs or not, but lyrics like "I Need a Fix" are difficult to imagine anything else. He was talking about when he was most certainly moving on from psychedelics to life-destroying substances. He did indeed deny Happiness was about H. However, Paul McCartney, who was watching his old friend and colleague obliterate himself, recalls his disappointment and frustration with John, even though it provided for some powerful imagery. Paul says, "He was getting into harder drugs than we'd been into, and so his songs were taking on more references to heroin. Until that point, we had made rather mild, rather oblique references to pot or LSD. Now John started talking about fixes and monkeys, and it was a harder terminology which the rest of us weren't into. We were disappointed that he was getting into heroin because we didn't really see how we could help him. It was a tough period for John, but often that adversity and that craziness can lead to good art, as I think it did in this case." Some of these facts are pretty heavy, I know. I suppose they all can't be all you need is love, right? Sometimes musicians have to express even the worst parts of themselves to create art with substance. But this next one I love when you can see the literal inspiration for a song. Much like Benefit of Mr. Kite was inspired by a poster John had seen, Happiness was inspired by a magazine. Not only gaining his final section of the song, but also the title of his song. John says, Happiness is a Warm Gun was from the cover of a gun magazine that George Martin had in the studio when we were making the double album. And it had Happiness is a Warm Gun on the cover. On this cover, it had a picture of a gun that had been shot and was smoking, I thought, wow, incredible. The fact that Happiness was a warm gun that had just shot something or somebody. I thought it was just fantastic, insane thing to say. In the May 1968 edition of American Rifleman, the article entitled Happiness is a Warm Gun depicts the author's pride in his 18-year-old son for using guns since he was 7 years old. Serendipitously, his son's name was John as well. And that title is actually a dark humored take on the Peanuts cartoon phrase, Happiness is a Warm Puppy. Dude, someone should make a parody of the song, but about puppies.
She's not a pup who misses much. Woof woof.
Paul also remembers that fateful magazine, and it's kind of interesting to see how Americans are viewed with all our love for things that go bang. Paul says, it was kind of saying, get ready for the long, hot summer with rifles, come on and buy them now. It was an American gun magazine, and it was so sick, the idea of come and buy your killing weapons. It was such a great line. That's John sort of took that and used it in a chorus. It's not deadly serious, it's just words. And I think if you really taxed him on it and said, would you be willing to die for these words? I'm sure he wouldn't. They're good words, and I'd stick up for them to anybody who worries about them. It's just good poetry. It's very similar to Bungalow Bill, in that it's a piss take of all the people who really do think happiness is a warm gun. One of my favorite parts about the 60s was the normalization of sexuality, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't thank many of the folks who came up around those years for the path they put us on, away from all that judgment, towards acknowledging its beauty. That is nothing to be ashamed of. John and Yoko often pushed the boundaries of society with their unabashed physical love often depicted in photographs. And even at a time where everything was getting banned left and right for even remotely sounding risque, they did it anyway. And in my opinion, in a nuanced way. I dig it. John directly comments that some of the lines in Happiness was directly related to his and Yoko's physicality, saying when he was asked in a Playboy interview, what's with all the sexual puns, such as, when you feel my finger on your trigger? John earnestly replies, it was at the beginning of my relationship with Yoko, and I was very sexually oriented then. When we weren't in the studio, we were in bed. Of course, the BBC banned it for that very reason, plus probably the figs part. But for this fact, I'd like to ruminate on what Lennon said about society in general. The quote, we live in a world where we have to hide to make love, while violence is practiced in broad daylight. Guys, this is a great fact. I love this one, and I also think Derek Taylor is awesome. Just look at this interview he did with George.
Derek, how would you describe George Harrison?
We're very dissimilar in some ways. He drives fast cars. I don't hold a driving license. He doesn't know anything about
Party, and I don't like them.
He doesn't like politics. I love opera. He can't stand people who make those noises. But I mean,
apart from that, we get on great.
You're great friends.
Yeah, very best
Well, it takes all kinds to make an interview.
Anyway, Derek is basically fundamental in his contribution to the lyrics of Happiness, and as you're going to see, most of your favorite lyrics came from him. He's also ultra humble about it, makes it so much more fantastic. Derek Taylor says, John said he had written half a song and wanted us to toss out phrases while Neil wrote them down. First of all, he wanted to know how to describe a girl who was really smart, and I remembered a phrase of my father's which was, she's not a girl who misses much. It sounds like faint praise, but on Mercy's side in those days, it was actually the best you could get. Then I told a story about a chap my wife Joan and I met in the Carrick Bay Hotel on the Isle of Man. It was late one night drinking in the bar, and this local fellow suddenly said to us, I like wearing moleskin gloves, It gives me a little bit of an unusual sensation when I'm out with my girlfriend. He then said, I don't want to go into details, so we didn't, but that provided the line, she's well acquainted with the touch of the velvet hand. Then there was like a lizard on a window pane. That to me was a symbol of very quick movement. Often when we were living in LA, you'd look up and see tiny little lizards nipping up the window. The bit about lying with his eyes while his hands were busy working overtime came from another thing I'd read, where a man wearing a cloak had fake plastic hands, which he would rest on the counter of a shop while underneath the cloak he was busy lifting things and stuffing them into a bag around his waist. I don't know where the soap impression of his wife came from, but the eating of something and then donating it to the National Trust came from a conversation we'd had about the horrors of walking in public spaces on Merseyside, where you were always coming across the evidence of people having crapped behind bushes and in old air raid shelters. So to donate what you've eaten to the National Trust, a British organization with responsibilities for upkeep and countryside of great beauty, was what would now be known as defecation on common land owned by the National Trust. When John put it all together, it created a series of layers of images. It was like a whole mess of color. Recorded on an Ampex 4-track, John is heard singing and playing guitar while most of the song is yet to be completed, 2 days before the Beatles would begin the White Album sessions. John even struggled with some of the chord changes, exclaiming, "Oh shit, wrong chord." Eventually, he records a home demo with Donovan's finger-picking style, and in September 1968, the group attempted the song and began to write arrangements. After run-through after run-through, the band is burdened with this song. Compelling and tedious timing and specifically articulated melodic shifts between each part proved to be quite overwhelming for the band. After tons of takes, John eventually asked the rest of the band, "Is anybody finding it any easier? It seems a little easier. It's just no fun, but it is easier." George says, "Easier and fun." And John responds, "Oh, all right, if you insist." After the 40th take, George says, "It's getting better in general." Then, after the 45th, John hollers, "Is it getting worse and worse?" And by 3 a.m. the next morning, they had nothing usable on record. The next evening, they worked their way up to 70 takes, and on the 65th, John protests, "Now I'm playing on a blister. When it bursts, I won't be able to play anymore." But they keep going, and after take 67, he says, "Please God, may my blister last so I may pick abundance with." And on the 70th take, John's blister broke, and that was it for him and this song. They spliced the best takes they could together to ready the song for overdubs. There was a bit of a phenomenon in the late 50s where bands would have a sort of monologue in the middle of the song, a spoken word poem, if you will. One of the most famous ones was bassist Bill Reed of the Diamonds' monologue in the song Little Darling.
My darling, I need you.
No doubt John was inspired by this with his 50s-esque part in the song, and in one of the takes for overdubs, John, instead of singing the line, decided to have a laugh and say it, "When I hold you in my arms, and I feel my finger on your trigger." Coincidentally, John ad-libbed similar 50s-style pop song lyrics onto his May 1968 demo for the song, I'm So Tired. "When I hold you in your arms, when you show each one of your charms, I wonder should I get up and go to the funny farm." John comments, "That bit at the end, shoot shoot bang bang, was instead of shoop shoop doo-wah doo-wah. The fact that the song was about a gun, we sang shoot shoot bang bang. We were cracking up when I was doing all that. You know, when I hold you in my arms. Very funny." Well, that's all for today, everyone. Boy, these videos are getting long. Before we go, it seems we'll be nearing 100,000 subscribers pretty soon. So exciting. I want to make a really crazy video about all this. Can you tell me your favorite moments from other videos so I can maybe put them in a clip show part? Or just any idea you have. Could be fun. Just leave a comment whenever you like. Okay, that's all. Love you. See you next time. Hollyhobs out.